more places to go? You didn't think that maybe we'd maybe stop it after 5 minutes?
Well, you know, we'd always had a very open conversation with Allan and everyone over powers that be about that anyway. You know, I don't think, you know, I guess if sort of 17 people watched the first series, we probably wouldn't be sat here, but I think because of the sort of enormity of the success of it, it just, you know, we always thought we'd do more and you would do more if given the opportunity, which we obviously got.
But also remember the first season had such a radical cliffhanger that it would have been near to impossible unless it was, you know, 17 people saw it to not go on with it. That was always certainly my understanding, that what I was signing up to, whether BBC Two liked it or not, was going to be beyond the 5.
There was an interesting moment in that episode we just watched, right at the beginning, when we see Gibson and there's a little story about the wrist snapper, and she says, once upon a time, I was in a similar situation. I wondered that the first series almost studiously avoided backstory for her. She remained enigmatic. Are we going to find out more about what she's been through in the past, and indeed, do you know her backstory?
We've discussed aspects of her backstory, and which have influenced aspects of ways that I've played certain moments. And do you see that there are a small handful of not even entire scenes, but moments where you understand her a little bit more. But if it were more than that, I would certainly be disappointed. That's not what we've set up, and that's not. She doesn't reveal herself that much, and so the little bits that you do get feel quite large, and I think that they are satisfactory and satisfying for the time being.
Can you say what you think is at the heart of the character, having played her?
At the heart of the character?
Yeah. Why does she do what she does?
What does she do? What does she do?
Well, follow this killer. Do her job in the way she does it. Stand up to those men by the car when most people would have been crumbling.
I think that she innately knows that she's good at it, and is passionate about the work that she does, and it is, as we see her life, you know, and she is happy in it, and she is particularly good at what she does. It's a choice that she made early on. We don't learn why she went into this particular field of work. I'm not sure whether it's it helps you. It would help you to understand her any more, to know that. I think what you come to is you come to understand a little bit more about other aspects of how she goes about what she does, and perhaps why she finds Spectre in particular so compelling, perhaps serial killers so compelling. Does that sound about right?
Yeah. I mean, you two can't have that many scenes, can't have had that many scenes together. Have you discussed the characters in this story much?
Between the two?
Yeah, between you and Gillian.
No.
Not interested in motives, in
no. I mean, look,
psychology.
All of that we, you know, used Allan for.
It's all on the page. It's all on the page.
And it's all like the mastery of his writing is sort of a lot of it's done, you know, for us. You know, we also see more than we see probably.
But also, how he operates, how Spectre operates has nothing. I mean, it has to do with or how Jamie perceives Spectre operating doesn't really have anything to do with the choices that I make. For Stella, especially because of the fact that we are, you know, we're not a married couple that have to talk about our joint history and conversations that we might have had together. We've never had conversations, so we're coming to our relationship fresh, and therefore I would imagine that the less talking we do, the better.
I mean, certainly in season one, we made a kind of conscious effort to keep them apart, in actual fact. And then there was the shared phone call, so there was a meeting in a way in the first season. But it was quite a conscious thing to try and stop you dialoguing very much up until that point, and that seemed to work. But there is clearly, an increasing fascination. I mean, he becomes fascinated by her in the first season, and she becomes fascinated by him in the first season. Her whole crusade, in a sense, is to stop him doing what he's doing. And she nails her colours to the mast, very firmly in season one, saying, "I will stop you." For Fiona Gallagher, for Alice Munro, for Sarah Kay, I will stop you from doing what you're doing. And equally, he, by virtue of calling her and so on, clearly becomes somewhat obsessed by her. So there's a growing obsession between them, which I think the second season, I don't think I'm giving anything away by saying the second season develops that increased increased conflict between them, but obsession that's growing between the two characters. But I think that's the nature of those investigations. I think everything I've read suggests that that's precisely what happens when a police officer sets out to try and stop a criminal from doing what they're doing, particularly a multiple murderer. The only way they can do it is by becoming completely immersed in that world and their world and trying to understand their psychology in the hope that they might gain the upper hand, that they might gain some investigative insight and therefore be able to put a stop to this man and what he's doing.
And for you, Jamie, I mean, how is an actor supposed to get himself into the mind of a multiple murderer? What do you do to inhabit the headspace of Paul Spector?
I did so much of the initial horrible research in the first series. Allan wrote me a list of rotten books that I trudged my way through and read in bed with my wife. So you're trying to find a sort of common thread between all of these guys you've read about, but not try to cling to any of them too firmly, because I wanted to make him his own thing. He deserves that, and that's what I tried to do. But there's lots out there. Anyone quite alarmingly quickly could get a good idea of what it's like inside the mind of some of these guys. There's plenty of interviews on YouTube with guys like Ted Bundy and whatever, and they are totally fascinating. Whether you're planning on playing a serial killer or not, I would
Highly recommend it.
well, it's time and place, but they are fascinating. With this series, I felt comfortable with what I'd sort of done in the first series, and it was a development anyway. He's in a different place, I think, to where we see him in the first series. So, and then there's little personal things that help me sort of jump back in the second series.
Does it have any impacts on you playing a man like that for several months?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Maybe not all positives, but yeah, I mean, you can't fail to be left slightly scarred by inhabiting something like that. For 2 seasons now, I do carry elements of him with me, and in a worrying way, and I find him relatable. Be careful how I use that, but I think I have a deep understanding of him and why he is how he is, and we get a bit more of a glimpse of that in the second series as an audience. But I think there's times when, especially towards the end of series 1 and the end of series 2 when we're filming, I would scare myself about how some of Jamie's reactions would be similar. I mean, hold on, who knows? But my distaste for things would have built up as over time of playing him, because he has such distaste for everything except his project, including family and everything. I wouldn't take it that far, but you do carry some of that anger and that hatred in you a little bit, especially towards the end of a few months of playing.
Do you think, Gillian, that Stella Gibson is a a character we might see more of. It struck me, obviously Alan has written for Jane Tennyson before, and she seems to be
Like
someone
an
young.
offshoot series.
Just asking.
I mean, more of them.
Do you think you'd want to play her more? You could take her further in this series?
Definitely, yes.
And
Hopefully so will you by the time. The rest of the
And is that because she's enigmatic and leaves us as an audience? There's lots to read into her, lots of questions to ask.
I think that potentially helps, yes. But I just think she's a very interesting character on television, and not just because she's an island and enigmatic, etc. But just who she is, everything that she stands for, and how she operates. I find on the page, I find that very compelling, and I don't feel like I've really seen that before. And I like characters that are both recognisable and mysteries at the same time to watch and to have an opportunity to.
You mentioned what she stands for. What would you say that is?
Well, I just think the way she makes it very clear on semi-regular basis how she feels about violence and violence against women, and about how these women are represented and how they are received, and how it is more helpful to speak about them, and she really is a supporter of women and women being treated respectfully and rightfully, and I think that she doesn't mince words when she speaks about it, and it feels like it is it's in her bones. It's not that she has a crusade of any kind, but it goes with her in her work and everything that she does, and I like that about her as well.
It might seem ironic to say, given the subject matter, but would you say, Alan, is this in some ways a feminist piece?
I'd like to think so. I mean, obviously there were people who thought the diametric opposite of that. But there were plenty of people, I think, who did understand what I was trying to achieve in writing it, that it is in a sense, a dissection of a certain kind of male view, a sort of exploration of misogyny. But I mean, I think anything that sets out to explore a complex and difficult and a subject like that always runs the risk of being held up as being an example of it rather than a critique of it. I mean, I don't. Obviously, if you think that The Fall is misogynistic, then I would have, if that was your conclusion at the end of watching the first season or the second season, then I would have failed completely, abjectly. My feeling is that people who think that about it probably haven't given it the closest reading, necessarily. It might be a knee-jerk reaction to something that depicts violence against women. But, you know, for me, the creation of the female characters within it and the entire ethos of the show and the entire argument, the dialectic of the show, I would have thought was completely clear that actually it's an attempt to take on a rather difficult subject, which is why it is that men turn so readily to violence and why it is that we see so many examples of violence against women perpetrated by men. And I think every beat of The Fall is really about trying to explain that. You know, for example, even in the first episode you've just seen, you know, what you get a very clear sense of when he's alone in the Scottish farmhouse is not just his unbelievable restlessness, his boredom at normal everyday life, but also by virtue of being alerted to the fact that his daughter's left her dolls behind, and then he ties one up and fantasizes about it. You get a very strong sense very early on that this man is driven by sadistic fantasies. And Gibson says during the course of the first episode, it's an addiction he can't stop himself from, being drawn back into that cycle of fantasy that then, and the crucial difference that she points out in season 1 between normal male fantasies, if you like, and his violent sexual fantasies is that at some point he takes the step of putting his fantasies into a kind of reality, and that's spoken about in this first episode. It will be spoken about more. But from that point of view, if you're looking at the sorts of things that men think that sometimes lead them into those sorts of relationships with women, where they are capable of perpetrating violence. They will think, for example, that women are dangerous. They will think that women are unknowable. They will think that the male sex urge is uncontrollable. All these sorts of things which, will add up to a person who's capable of acting like that. So I think that's what The Fall is trying to dissect and explore. And I think it does it from a feminist point of view. I'm a bloke, so I can't claim to be feminist. But certainly nothing that I've ever written would have been written with some notion of degrading or demeaning women, or indeed being, I wrote The Second Prime Suspect, and it was set in an Afro-Caribbean community. I was living in Brixton at the time. And when we came to edit it for PBS, for broadcast in America, Gub will remember this, there was a racist tirade from a white character towards the end of the episode, and it made me take it all out, because they couldn't have anyone uttering racist epithets. That makes it very difficult to write a racist, So inevitably, if you're going to have a character like Spectre, you're going to be taking on board some really, very disturbing psychological dimensions to the character, and you're playing them through. But at the same time, you're also saying that no criminal is just their criminality.